On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, welcome back to JLF's Brave New World Voices of Faith series, presented by the Kamini and Vindi Banga Family Trust. A magazine partner for this series is The Week, Journalism with a Human Touch. Our session today, The Power of Prayer. Joshua Pollock in conversation with Rishabh C. Kothari. Moving and evocative session with heartfulness practitioner, trainer, and author Joshua Pollock on the power of prayer. The author of the Heartfulness Way speaks to us about the heart-based meditation and the nuances of the heartful way. An accomplished Western classical violinist, Pollock has performed internationally and collaborated with composer A.R. Rahman on film scores including Daaji and Delhi 6. Pollock has worked extensively with Kamlesh D. Patel, also widely known as Daaji, the fourth guru of the heartfulness tradition, on the human quest for meaning and peace. Conversation with entrepreneur and heartfulness trainer Rishabh Kothari, he explores the transformative power of prayer to unburden the human spirit from all limitations. Rishabh C. Kothari is an entrepreneur by profession and heartfulness meditation trainer by passion. To remember, all our sessions that have been broadcast till now are available on our Facebook page, JLF Litfest, and on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest JLF, including all our sessions on the Voices of Faith series. Please do remember to ask questions and comment by typing it into the comment section below. Ladies and gentlemen, the power of prayer. Joshua Pollock in conversation with Rishabh C. Kothari. Over to you.
Thank you, Sanjoy. We're extremely grateful to you and your team and everyone at JLF for giving us this opportunity to discuss the power of prayer. Prayer is a very interesting and often a misused or rather a misunderstood word. And I'm really happy to be able to discuss this with my dear friend and brother, Joshua. And I know he has spoken and written about this even in his book, The Heartfulness Way. So Joshua, would you like to start off with what does prayer mean to you before we can even discuss what the power of prayer is?
Well, yes. Thank you very much for this opportunity to meet with you all and speak to you. Thank you to JLF and to Namita and to you, Rishabh, for agreeing to appear and speak with me today here. I would just like to begin. I came across a quote from one Sufi saint named, I suppose, forgive me for all of my pronunciation mistakes, by the way. So there's a Sufi saint named Rabia, and she was from Basra in modern day, in what is now Iraq in modern times. And she has a quote which struck me very deeply. I wrote it down. She said, "Oh God, set fire to paradise and pour water on the fires of hell. Then people might pray to God for the sake of his love alone, and not for the sake of some reward or out of fear of punishment." And I just thought that this was such a noble approach to prayer, to pray, to forget about, wanting to go to paradise, wanting to go to heaven, or to forget about being afraid of, hell or punishment, and only to pray to God for that divine love alone, caring for nothing else. I thought was just the highest approach I could think of to prayer. And I like this quote so much.
That is lovely. I think, when you were talking about that, it reminded me also of this story I had read somewhere, about a saint who actually went down and burnt an entire temple. And there was this whole crowd which was very upset about it. And they asked him, there was this large temple and people were going there and visiting. And he said, the reason I burnt it down was because I wanted people to forget the house and rather remember the master of the house. So I think somewhere this resonates when you talk about the whole idea of reward or fear of punishment. But Joshua, even in your book, I recall you speaking about prayer being driven by fear and desire,
Mm.
in this book, and also mentioning that we create God in our own image when we talk about fear and desire. Would you like to elaborate on that?
That's a passage from the section on prayer in the Heartfulness Way. And you know, the Heartfulness Way, I'll just want to mention, it's a book of conversations between myself and my guide, Daaji, guides this heartfulness approach. And this, so in this section on prayer, this is a point when Daaji told me that oftentimes when people pray, it is out of fear that they pray, just as Rabia said, or it's out of desire or to fulfill some need that they pray. And therefore, in doing so, they create God, or rather not create God, but project onto God, right? And turn divinity into something which is there to protect them or there to provide for them. So God becomes a protector and God becomes a provider. And this limits us so much because now we're only seeing through the lenses of our own prejudices and our own hopes and desires and fears. And we're unable to see the reality for what it truly is. So this fear-based and desire-based approach to divinity prevents somehow the real relationship from unfolding as it could, right? So, and that, to my understanding, is the real purpose of prayer. It is to sort of create that connection between, you know, the individual soul and the supreme soul, or, you know, the individual being and the supreme being, right? And that has to be something that's based on love, because if it's transactional in any way, once the transaction is finalized and concluded, then so is the relationship. So if this relationship is to be an eternal relationship, which is what it's supposed to be, right? Then that means it cannot be transactional, right? That's the only way it can be permanent. And if it's not going to be transactional, that means what will it be based upon? That means it has to be based on love. It has to be based on love. So, you know, there's in the book, I remember there was one part of the book where an example was given, right? In the Heartfulness Way, where he said, suppose that you have a loved one, right? And you give this loved one, a family member, perhaps you give them a gift. It's their birthday, why not? And so they take it, and instead of just receiving it with appreciation and gratitude, they just rip it out of your hands and they unwrap it and tear open the wrapping paper, and without even looking at you or, you know, acknowledging you, they just run away with this thing, right? So the question is, how would that make you feel as a giver? And of course, if you really love that person, you don't really care. You're happy that they appreciate the gift. But that's not the point here. The point here is that their focus is on the gift, not the giver, right? Their focus is on the gift, right? And they ignore the giver. But the purpose of giving a gift or receiving a gift should be to create some sort of unity between the giver and the receiver, right? And if the gift itself comes in the way, then the whole point is in some way lost. So, you know, that's the same thing that happens in worldly interactions. It matters so much more when we're speaking of this divine interaction, if I can call it that, you know.
I understand. I mean, in fact, when you use the word transactional, it really resonates with me. I mean, I remember as a child, and especially in the Indian tradition, and I'm sure that it is there in various forms in various traditions, where you have this whole idea of mannat, or the idea of offering something to God in return of something having happened. If my child is well, I will do this, or something happens. So I understand that idea of transaction when you talk about. But also, I mean, don't you think it's pretty natural to pray when you're under duress, you need relief? If we are talking about God, isn't He or the entity the one you're going to look up to in times of severe duress, or when you just need some help or succor?
I mean, yeah, we can't overlook that, can we? You're absolutely right. I mean, you know, one who believes in God, who maybe even goes beyond the belief in God, but can feel that sort of divine presence in their life, that person will have a sense of dependence, you know. And in that sense of dependence, it does become natural, right? To share your worries, to share your fears and your concerns. And by the way, not just about yourself, right? I think the essence of this whole issue is selfishness, right? Versus, you know, an inclusive approach, right? And I think what we want is an inclusive approach. If we're talking about creating a sense of oneness between the creator and the creation, we're talking about what is the use of that if we're separated from everybody else around us? So the idea is that the heart has to be moved, not just for my own, you know, prerogatives, but for those people around me or those people that I know about or hear about. You know, when that affects my heart, then automatically the heart will cry out for myself or for others, you know, empathy and compassion, right? So that has to be an aspect of it. But also there's another aspect, which is in the Heartfulness Way, there was in one of our conversations in the Heartfulness Way, there was one time when Daaji mentioned this very fact of the naturalness of crying out, this inner cry. But that if we're going to also have this inner cry and share our concerns and miseries, then why not also share our joys, right? When we're so happy. So that's the issue, another issue, right? Why keep your joys to yourself, but your miseries you share? So share everything then in that case. In that case, your misery you share, your joy you share, and not just your joy and your misery, but other people's misery you share and other people's joy you share. So it all becomes some sort of communal experience, communal human divine experience that we're all playing our part in. And I think with this approach to prayer, it becomes possible to create a much sort of greater intimacy and feeling of connection with ourselves and others and the divine as well. And I'm also reminded of this concept that is present in the Gita, actually, Nishkam Karma, desireless action, which a lot of people, of course, take to mean in a worldly sense, right? But then again, in a worldly sense, none of us follow that, right? Because this, what I mean is the idea of doing some work without entertaining the expectation of receiving a reward for that work, right? So, you know, none of us in life would ever go to our job and slave away in the cubicles or whatever it is that we're doing without some expectation of a paycheck, right? We'd be crazy to do that without some expectation of a paycheck, right? So the idea, you know, is that this does not apply in the worldly sense, but it absolutely applies in the spiritual sense. Because in the spiritual sense, as long as you entertain expectation, then it automatically becomes transactional relationship. So you have to remove that and absorb this approach of Nishkam Karma when you're dealing with spirituality now. So it's with this kind of have no intentions, have no expectations. You know, it is this purity that's going to weave my spiritual destiny with the ultimate, you know.
That's beautifully put. I think what you mentioned about this whole idea of sharing our joys with the Lord, if we can share our sorrows with Him. That's nice. And also you mentioned when you talk about the Gita and this whole idea of Nishkam Karma, I want to just shift gears a bit. I mean, especially when you talk about the Gita and our own traditional literature and Vedic literature. I know you've been pursuing these books and you've been studying yoga and these subjects and I think your next book is also somewhere on those lines,
Yeah,
and we're all eagerly looking forward to it. So,
thanks.
what would you have to say about the whole idea of yoga, the whole idea of union, the whole idea of uh, this whole connection that is there? I mean, it's. I'm sure it's far more beyond just the mere act of prayer. It's the whole idea of praying or the act of prayer is just a symbolism of a larger connection. So, what do you have to say about that?
It's really good question. It resonates with me a lot because look at me. I'm some American. I was not raised in any kind of religious household, right? You know, my mother came from a Jewish family. My father came from a Catholic family, and I wasn't raised in any tradition. And you know, and my interest, you know, lies in meditation. And I'm in Delhi right now also. I feel very strongly that there are certain themes, spiritual themes, which run through so many different faiths. And I do not subscribe to such, you know, rigid doctrines about anything, you know. And when I think of prayer, when I think of this concept of trying to connect yourself with the absolute, right, I'm reminded very strongly of yoga. Because what is the difference between connecting and uniting? Because yoga itself, okay, let me just say that yoga itself is thought to contain, you know, Sanskrit roots, which mean to unite, which mean union, right? Because in those days, you know, I mean, this word yoga it's there in the Rig Veda, right? I think it's the oldest document. It's not a document, but the oldest scripture that exists, right? And in those times, in those Vedic times, I suppose it was an agricultural society, and all of the symbolism was based on this sort of agricultural lifestyle. So you have yoga, you have this concept of a yoke, because you have to yoke two bulls together, right? If you're going to plow a field. So this idea, the symbol of the yoke was there to unite two things, right? Now, what are we uniting here? We don't really get a clear picture of this till Yoga Yajnavalkya, at sometime before the 10th century. And he very blatantly, very explicitly says that yoga is the union between the Jivatma and Paramatma, right? Union between the individual soul and the supreme soul. So what is the difference between the individual soul connecting with the absolute or uniting? I find it only a matter of degree. Same principle, right? So the same principle is there. But now an interesting connection I find with actually Christianity is that if you have the idea of union, if you're entertaining this notion, it also means that you're entertaining the idea of separation. Because unless there's separation, then why are we talking about union? Unless there's separation, then why are we talking about connection? And Christianity is all about sort of an original blessed state wherefrom we fell, right? Wherefrom somehow we became separate from that divine current, and they started to exist in an individual basis. But if you look here, and now coming back to Indian philosophy, and we find this concept of Jivatman, right? Which has its instruments, its faculties, such as, you know, manas, buddhi, ahankar, chit, right? Consciousness, mind, intellect, you know, ego. Now, what is the purpose of these instruments? Though these are navigation. This is to help this individual soul navigate on its way back to this state of union, right? And the path backwards, so it's a return journey. Somehow we became separated, or we fell under this illusion of separation, perhaps. But whatever the case may be, we have this feeling that we're separate. God may not feel that we're separate, but from our perspective, we feel that we're separated. And now that we need to return. And so we're retracing our steps. The spiritual journey is about retracing our steps backward. Right? Now, in the heartfulness approach to that, we have this idea that there are all these centers in our human system, 13 chakras, in fact, not the traditional 7, but 13. And that each one of them, as we climb, as we go on this inner yatra, this inner journey, right? Stopping at each of these stations along the journey, along the inner pilgrimage, right? That each one brings us closer to that original state where finally we're resolving this state of separateness. In union, we're resolving that. And in so doing, we're resolving the human condition itself. But prayer would be the first stage, right? To create that connection. But having attained the final thing, the idea of praying for oneself at least now seems a bit ridiculous. It would be like proposing to your wife, right? You're already married. You don't need to propose to your wife. So like that. That's the way I feel about it.
That was very interesting. I think we've looked at prayer in various perspectives, and I think we've spoken about the whole philosophy, the whole idea of connecting. But I mean, suppose let's just try to make this whole thing concise and say, suppose we were to explain someone uh, who's got none of this philosophical inkling and just say,
Mm.
just tell him how to pray. I mean, because it's the world where you need to have everything for dummies, everything for idiots. And so maybe you can create a heartfulness way for dummies or something, and
No,
tell us
no, no,
in a
no.
nutshell, how do I pray? I mean,
Okay, so I've made
what is
this
that?
mistake, right? I've made this mistake of telling people how to pray, and I don't ever want to make this mistake again. I read a story. I read a Tolstoy short story called Three Hermits. Maybe some people, viewers, have read this story. If you haven't, like any story by Tolstoy, you should. And this particular story, Three Hermits, it's actually a retelling of an old legend, a Russian legend. Now, apparently what happened is there was one bishop, and this bishop was traveling by a fishing boat or something. He was on the water, he was traveling, and he overheard some conversation, and he was listening, and some locals were talking about, oh, there's the island where those three holy men live. There's the island, they are pointing it out. And the bishop had never heard of these holy men. He, of course, being a bishop, he was interested. So he says, who are these people? So he comes to find out that there are these three hermits who live on this tiny little island, and they're just, there are a few people who've seen them and everything, but a lot of people have a great respect for them and almost regard them as saints. So the bishop says, take me there. And they kind of, oh, it's going to delay our journey. But he's so insistent, he wants to see these three hermits. So they say, okay, we'll take you as far as we can take you. Then you get in the rowboat and row the rest of the way yourself. So I said, great. So he's excited. In the early morning, he sets off. He goes to the island, and there they are. These three hermits. He had so much expectation, but what does he find? In his eyes, they're just, simpletons, right? They don't know anything. He asked them, what are you doing? I hear such great things. You must be serving humanity, but how are you serving humanity here on this tiny island by yourselves where there's nobody else, right? And they say, we're not serving humanity. We're just serving ourselves and trying to pray and get salvation for our souls. So he says, well, how do you pray then? And they say, well, they say, we are three, ye are three, please save us, right? Because, ye are three, that means, because in the Christian tradition, there's this idea of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So the bishop thinks to himself, oh, they must have heard that somewhere, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So he asks them, what do you know about the Trinity? And they say, what? They don't know anything about it. So he realizes he has quite a task ahead of himself. He has to educate them. They obviously don't know how to pray. So he's like, I have to teach them how to pray. So he explains the entire dogma. He explains all the philosophy and the noble tradition of Christianity, right? Tells them they know nothing. Now comes time to teach them to pray properly, right? So there's the Lord's Prayer, right? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. By the way, let me just take a break from the story and make an aside. I told you my father was born in a Catholic household. He said when he was a kid, he misheard this prayer, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. He misheard it. He thought it was Harold be thy name when he was a kid. So he thought God's name was Harold for a lot of years. Anyway, back to the story. The bishop educates the hermits. He tells them the Lord's Prayer, but they can't get it right. He has to go line by line. They're studying him. They look from different angles, see how he moves his mouth, try to imitate him, and he's really not getting anywhere. So he spends a whole day, everybody's frustrated. By the end of the day, they can finally say it. themselves from beginning to end, and he thinks, I've done my duty. Now I can leave. He makes them repeat it once more. He's satisfied and he goes. And they're so thankful to him because they say, we didn't know anything, and now you've come along and you've helped us so much. So they're really grateful. So he rows back to the boat. He gets on the fishing boat and away he goes and they sail off. Now it's nighttime. The moon is out and he's standing there looking over the water. They're seeing the moon reflected in the water. And he's thinking to himself, yeah, what a wonderful thing he did. And then he sees something in the distance and he can't make out what it is. No, it's something moving on the water. Is it a boat? No, it can't be a boat. Is it a fish? It can't be a fish. What is this? And as it becomes closer and closer, to his shock, he sees what it is. It's these 3 hermits running on the surface of the water, running toward him, waving their arms. Stop, stop, stop. And in fact, they aren't even running. Their legs aren't moving. They're standing on the water top, on the surface, and they're just gliding, like floating on the surface of the water. They're saying, stop. We forgot the prayer you taught us. What are we going to do? Please teach it to us again. And he realized his folly. Here I am teaching these holy men, true saints. I'm teaching them how to pray. And he immediately just felt ashamed and he begged their forgiveness. And he said, you pray in your way. Right? So what is this? I love this story. So what does this story tell me, right? Prayer has to be from the heart. Even if it's a simple prayer, as long as it's from the heart, that's the only thing that's going to create that true connection, right? And as a musician myself, I know that it doesn't matter how, I'm a violinist, right? It doesn't matter how perfectly you play. All the fingers exactly the right places, the bow, everything, the technique perfect. The audience is just going to be looking at their watches. They're going to be bored and want to go home waiting for the end if it doesn't move their hearts. And if it does move their hearts, they're going to forgive you for all your mistakes. So that's the way this has to be done. This is a language. Prayer is a language, and it's a language of feeling, and it's a language, and feeling is that means we're using our hearts. So, we speak English or Hindi or Sanskrit or Latin or anything we speak with our mouths, but feeling is the language that we speak with our heart. So we have to use the heart for prayer, right? And when we're using the heart for prayer, we don't even need to use words necessarily. Now, so that's sort of an argument against ready-made prayers. But even if you have a ready-made prayer, if that prayer really comes from the source, if that prayer has been given, this is nothing against Tolstoy's story. It seems like it's making fun of the Lord's Prayer. That's not my intention, because whether it's the Lord's Prayer or even in Heartfulness, we have a prayer that we use. If that prayer, if you go into that, not mentally, but with true feeling in the heart, you discover those vibrations, those sacred vibrations that are present in that prayer, and then it can connect you. So it's not just about an issue of ready-made prayers versus spontaneous prayers. It's an issue of everything that you do, right? Whether it's spontaneous or otherwise in life, if you put your heart into this activity, then it's going to have some meaning, and then it's going to communicate, and then you'll resonate with everything that is all around you. So this is, I think that you create a connection with true prayer. And I say true, not just prayer, but we in Heartfulness speak of prayerfulness, right? And having created that connection, right? Now you can dive deeper in it. And that is the role of meditation. You've created a connection. Now go deeper and create that union that we speak of in yoga. It goes beyond connection, where two become one. Where, Kabir, he says the drop falls into the ocean, right? Nobody knew whether Kabir was Muslim or Hindu. They still argue. To him, it didn't matter. There's reality. The drop falls into the ocean, he said, and it becomes transformed as the ocean, and the drop has no more identity. It doesn't know, oh, now I'm part of the ocean. No, it's dissolved itself. So that's what we do in meditation.
That's beautiful, Joshua. In fact, I mean, I think this whole thread, which we started off with, understanding the meaning of prayer, has, I mean, it's come out so beautifully to to highlight the fact that it's all about connecting the words and the way and the any other paraphernalia that we may have around prayer, candles, music, or whatever else, is absolutely what it is. It's paraphernalia. It's not the essence. It's all about
Mm.
establishing that connection and going within. And as you put it, that it's about taking you to this whole meditative state. And I know that we had discussed this, that it would be wonderful if we can actually demonstrate this for our audiences here, and just walk them through perhaps a small session for them to experience for themselves. So if you would,
Yes.
I think that would be wonderful to actually translate into experience what we have been discussing, talking, and hearing.
How much time do we have left?
We have
A few
around
minutes, right?
15 odd minutes, I think.
15 minutes. We can do something very short, I think.
Yes, please.
Yeah? Let's just do what we'll do. Why don't we? So, this heartfulness approach, it's all about the essence. That's as I've understood heartfulness. We can talk about its techniques. We can talk about prayer and meditation. We can talk about other aspects too. There are other practices. Really, it's about the essence and connecting with the essence and becoming one with the essence. Now, when we meditate, oftentimes we find it so much easier to meditate coming out of this hectic world if we have a chance to relax our physical bodies first, right? So I'll take you through this physical relaxation. That's what we'll do. We'll go from one muscle to the other, from the whole body. And I'll guide you through that. And then I don't think we have enough time to really meditate, but maybe just a minute or so afterwards, we'll just have a taste of that. And we'll do that. Okay.
Sure, sounds great.
So I invite everybody sitting at home, join us. Let's meditate together. Okay. So sit in any way you like. Okay. And bring your attention to your toes. You can wiggle your toes just to become aware of them. And now relax them. You can even imagine a current of healing energy entering through the soles of your feet from the earth. This energy of Mother Earth, it's helping your feet to relax. And you can imagine this energy gradually and gently moving upward and relaxing every muscle that it touches, every body part. Relaxing your feet and ankles. And allowing this energy to continue. Relaxing your lower legs. And now relax your knees. And let your upper legs become relaxed. Relax every muscle. Relax your thighs. Relax your hips. And waist. Allow your abdominal muscles to relax deeply. and relax every muscle in your chest. Your whole back, your back muscles from the base of your spine moving upwards, your lower back. Let any tension simply dissolve. And relax your upper back. And allow your whole torso to feel very relaxed. Allow this energy, this gentle healing energy, continue to move through you, moving to your shoulders now. Allow it into your shoulders. Let it relax your shoulders deeply. Let them feel like they're melting. Let this feeling of fluidity and relaxation spread. Let it move down your arms, your tricep muscles and biceps. Let them relax. Relax your elbows. And all the muscles in your forearms. Relax your wrists and hands. Your fingers and fingertips. Come to your neck muscles and relax them. Your throat. And relax your jaws. Let your lower jaw drop a little. Relax your mouth, your tongue and teeth, your lips, and all of the muscles of your face. Relax your eyes and eyeballs, and let there be so much softness around your eyes. Relax your brow. And let your temples be relaxed. Relax your ears and relax your earlobes. And let this relaxation envelop all of you, all the way to the top of your head and down to the very tip of your toes. You can become aware of your entire body. And if there's any place you find that's crying out for further relaxation, that needs to feel more balanced, suggest to yourself that this place also is becoming relaxed. This muscle or organ. And now let your attention be drawn to your heart. That is, to the physical organ of your heart, there on the left side of your chest. This heart, the organ of feeling, it is the interface with the divine. It is your portal there to the eternal. And you can imagine, or rather suggest to yourself, that this heart of yours is pervaded by divine light. And the source of that divine light is also there within your heart. You needn't try to see this light. It is there. This light is something which you can only feel. And you can settle yourself there in the heart on this idea of the source of light within. Light which will draw you further into yourself, to a state of balance. And like this, let's spend 1 minute in silence with our hearts open. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joshua Pollock, for that beautiful, beautiful meditation, sort of connecting us not just to the earth, but our inner selves. Thank you, Rishabh Kothari, for being in conversation with Joshua. Thank you all for watching. I do hope you all felt the energy and the power stream through each of you during this process of meditation. And thank you to the Kamini and Vindi Banga Foundation for supporting the Voices of Faith series. Please do log back on Wednesday, the 16th of December, for our next set of exciting sessions on JLF's Brave New World. Till then, stay safe, stay masked, and stay connected.